Okay, it's 6 o'clock, so I think we'll get started. It's the Committee on Economic Development and Planning. Myself, Ken Woodland, Chair, Lisa Feltner, Vice Chair, Vincent Picciarelli, Secretary. Tonight we're meeting to discuss a whole host of issues, updates on a couple, and a couple of new ones as well. But I think we'll start off with a presentation and update on the Wayfinder grant. And with that, I'll turn things over to Steve or Laura, whoever wants to make an introduction.
I'll just quickly introduce Mark Faberman. We got a grant from DHCD to do a wayfinding plan. Mark is the consultant who is helping us produce that plan. We did have an advisory committee that had representatives from DPW and planning. We had a Coolidge Square businessman, Don Levy from the Deluxe Town Diner. We had Connie Braceland from Watertown Savings Bank. We had someone from the Bike Ped Committee, because it is ongoing, Sheila Fay, and we had Catherine Madden, who was an economic development, community development design consultant. So we've gotten to the point where we have a proposed design to show to you. We still have to do the placement of the signs. We have not really gotten into that yet, but I'm going to turn it over to Mark to present, to sort of bring you up to date on what we've been doing these past few months.
Okay, let me share screen a little bit and start our there we go. Okay, so to give you a little bit more background, this is what's called an MDI grant, and it's from the Massachusetts Downtown Initiative Program, and it's highly competitive. So Watertown won it, and it's about a year ago now. And we are the consultants for this focus, which is a planning specialty to actually help the community brand, to make it become a destination rather than just a place, and then follow that up with wayfinding, signage elements, and visual aspects to it. In some cases, communities apply it to their official website and social media. So I'm going to go through the process a little bit, and then we'll show you what we came up with. So we asked this question at the beginning: what is branding? And branding is identity or visual appearance. It's intangible assets that add value, especially to real estate and even to retail. And it's a positive image to both visitors and residents. And what does branding reinforce? A sense of arrival, a sense of place, even a sense of direction, and a sense of shared experience. So initially we looked at what is Watertown. We tried to describe that in a lot of ways. I'm just going to go through a bunch of images, and from housing to retail to renovated spaces and old factories, and the famous bridge, the Armenian diaspora, the elegant buildings like the Free Library and the high school and Perkins Institute. So we asked the committee, after several weeks of focusing on these types of issues, how would you describe Watertown with one word? And the committee came up with a number of one-word descriptions. And then we, after looking at that for a while, we asked them to come up with 2 words. And then finally, we asked them to come up with 3 or more words. And out of the 3 or more words, we sometimes come up with a tagline or a slogan. In this particular case, the one that the committee seemed to like the best was bridging cultures. We also tried to look at colors that were associated with Watertown, as well as discussing symbols, icons, and monuments that express the town of Watertown. And then there were some aspirational discussions as well, which dealt with what the future should be. Then from that, we came up with this as an image. And then this is how it's applied to some gateway sign elements. And we tried through the committee to take a look at everything in Watertown and show various aspects of it together. I call this a family of elements, and these are how different size sign elements can be used throughout the community. Let's see. Part of them could be smaller gateway signs, parking directional parking signs, even bike trails and rail trail types of things around town if necessary. Also, more substantial signs with some directional, interesting directional signage, banners, and a smaller type of gateway / directional sign. So the next thing that we're going to do with the committee is take a map of Watertown and then apply these elements throughout and see initially what the downtown does in the various gateway entrances to the town, and then apply to other sort of neighborhood residential settings. Less is more here, so we're not going to over sign anything, but we're going to try to make it make the experience of entering Watertown much clearer, much simpler, and much more direct. So any questions? And I'm sure Laura can answer a few too.
Great. So open it up to the committee. Start with Vinny or Lisa. If you guys want to start with any questions on the design. Or Steve, sorry, do you want to jump in?
I just wanted to add real quickly, I think Mark has done a great job of coming up with a design that captured several elements of Watertown. We did have some earlier versions that we felt like didn't really capture everything. I think this one, captures the water with the Charles River, which is such an important element of the town. That iconic bridge as well going across it. And then, some of the more significant buildings in town as well to try and, kind of capture, various aspects of the town all at once while still having the trees and the natural environment as well. We had some earlier ones that we kind of felt were a little too much oriented towards, the environmental features, and some that were maybe a little too much towards the built environment. So we really thought this one captured, both of those in a really well-balanced fashion. So I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. Vinny or Lisa, did you guys have any questions, comments, or anything on the designs?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Lisa. Go ahead, Lisa, you go first.
Sorry, I couldn't see everybody with the presentation. Yeah, I guess I'm a little curious, practically speaking, this design seems like it might be difficult to translate well in a small format. So I don't know if there are like other iterations of this for depending on, what you're going to use it, or be able to really see what it is from afar. I like the colors. So I guess I don't know if you can share more about the process of, and I imagine some people think, bridging culture is a great theme. Was there any talk of alluding to people or just the environment and buildings? Or I'm just trying to understand a little more how you got here, I guess.
Well, I can explain something, and hopefully some others who can join in. We went through many iterations of an image, from something very painterly to this is much more graphic and simplified. I can also see this graphic broken down into other pieces, because there's housing here, there's the bridge and water, there's a library, there's an old mill, there's Perkins Institute. So there are a lot of things here that can be used in different ways, and we can explore that and show you. In some cases, some signs will not have it on it at all. Only generally the larger ones will have it. But even a medium-sized sign like the parking sign will not necessarily have the image on it as well. We did a number of, and maybe I didn't show it long enough, we did a number of 3 or more word or phrases, basically. And these are among the group. There were actually more. And the idea of acceptance and the idea of culture came out very strongly. And the sense that Watertown had the first bridge over the Charles, and it sort of, the bridge became a metaphor for building social as well as physical structures.
I guess, was there any thought of having a more simplified logo again, or other iterations you said of
Well, the committee,
I mean, we're not really a mill town anymore.
well, but that's your history, and that's what, and you have a lot of people enter Watertown going past the Arsenal, and that's certainly a very strong mill area, and you have that as part of the history. So we were dealing with the historical aspects of Watertown as well as the contemporary. Now, I think the design is very contemporary looking, and I think that the freshness of it, I think, is good. The committee wanted to have the whole spectrum of things that were meaningful to the town. Now, Laura, you may want to reinforce what I'm saying here.
Mr. Chairman, if I could jump in again, I think, obviously one image is difficult to convey everything to everybody, but to the councilor's point, I think, the 2 things, the bridging cultures definitely is, obviously, people oriented. It's focused on the various cultures that people have here and the diversity of the town. While the image doesn't include people, I think that's pretty typical of these types of, branding images. They don't tend to be people focused. They tend to be more, as Mark said, we did have one that was more painterly. It was sort of a image that looked sort of like a landscape painting. And we thought that didn't translate very well to the signs, that it became too, it had issues, particularly with the smaller ones. I think this translates pretty well to the smaller signs because it is pretty simplistic in its nature. It's being a line drawing, it is something that I think is pretty easily understood and translatable.
I guess my main concern, if I was gonna, it's just, I love this. This is the fun part, and I appreciate all your work. I know it's a ton of work, a lot of ideas too. Is if you have to kind of look at it and try to figure out what you're looking at, because that's a hard thing. I know when you're involved in it and you know what you're drawing. I'm not really sure, other than I could say that's the Perkins Tower, and okay, the river, some trees and bridges. The mill building, I think, for me, translates because of being near the dam, Sasaki property and that. But the other building, so that's just my first impression. I don't want to dominate the conversation, but I would have some concern that that it really, I'm not sure if it really clearly speaks what you're trying to get across, but I do like the stated goal.
Vinny, did you want to add in?
Sure. Hey, Mark, could you maybe just zoom in a little bit, make that just a little bit bigger? Is that possible? It's just hard when looking at the screen here. My first thing, bridging cultures, the first thing I said, oh, is that like 2 churches?
Yeah.
And I think most people are going to read those as 2 churches. I think, now that you mentioned it's Perkins School, yeah, I can sort of see that. The one in the center, is that the town hall tower? Is that sort of a representation of?
That could be, or it could be one of the churches. The,
Okay, and
the building on the right bottom is the library. And then the houses, and that was a very strong component that the committee really wanted, showed the sort of solid housing stock of Watertown.
The library kind of looks like a mausoleum. I don't know.
Yeah. I would just say, one thing, the Arsenal is sort of, if there's one thing that defines Watertown, like it or not, it's certainly the Arsenal. And I thought that would have been a major design element. The classic 1850s buildings, with a pediment, and sort of that neoclassical look to them. I mean, I like stylistically, I like it. I like the bridging cultures. But again, if it's, and again, we're sort of insiders, and I think, we have to think how the public's going to look at this. I think the public's going to look at this and say, it's like, there's two churches. And, couple of houses. I mean, I think if we're going to show a house, we should probably show the classic double-decker house, which is, someone said if there was going to be a postcard of Watertown, the 1920s double-decker would be on it. The library, I mean, everybody loves the library, but I sort of have to agree with Lisa that doesn't, I mean, don't take this the wrong way, but that doesn't really do it for me. But I do really think the Arsenal should have a more prominent place. And I guess for that central thing, we got to decide, is that?
Hey, Vin, you're cutting out. Did Vinny just freeze on everyone?
Yeah. He's frozen.
Okay. Give him like 5 seconds, see if he can catch up on the lag. Yeah.
The center one was intended to be the cupola on top of town hall, to clarify.
Yeah, that's what I figured it was. Okay, well, let's open it up real quick, and once Vinny gets back in, we can go back. Does any member of the public or any other counselors on the call have any feedback, input, questions? And just use the raise hand function on Zoom, and we'll go from there. Okay. I don't see anyone.
There's one.
Lisa, did you want to speak again?
Well, thanks. Yeah, since
Sure.
I mean, people may be working with their buttons, but I guess I'll just speak up again in that I guess one of my concerns is that what if town hall changes? I mean, I like the idea when you say bridging cultures and thinking the water in the bridge. I don't know. I guess I would prefer somehow to be even more simplified. I don't think the houses really, to me, I wasn't even sure if that was Perkins. I thought maybe that was the Baptist church at the end of my street, which is gorgeous. So it does look like churches. I think the mill building is probably the clearest sign of some, factory near the water. The other elements are just not, I think certainly to the general public outsider, in terms of branding Watertown, I don't think that comes across. And even as an insider, it's not convincing to me. I certainly understand why you don't use people, because I could see where that might be, unless you wanted to, if you had some famous founder or something, or, took elements from the seal or the fowl house or something, if you really wanted to just focus more on a specific history of the founding of Watertown. But I certainly see the desire to have it be more modern as well, and kind of speak to relevant today's living in Watertown and maybe looking to the future. So hopefully we'll get many back. I'll leave it there.
Okay. Does anyone else in the public or any counselors or anything have any comments?
I'm back now, so.
Oh, okay, nice. Yeah, Vin, you got cut off from probably the very last line of what you were mentioning. If you want to jump back in.
Yeah, so I just sort of echoing a little bit what Lisa said. I just think that, you know, we have to think about, you know, people looking at this the first time, you know, out of towners. And I think if we want to have, you know, what it, you know, I mean, what do we want to represent to people? And what, when we say bridging cultures, you know, we show the mill building, the library does, you know, does not read as the library. And I don't think most people would even understand that. And the two towers, you know, are going to read as churches, even though we know that that's the Perkins Tower. So I'm not sure that I mean, I sort of like the stylized image. And again, I would say that, you know, I would somehow maybe replace the library with the Arsenal, because the Arsenal really is part of the, you know, deeply defined Watertown. It's who we are.
Can I ask you a question? What
Sure.
part of the Arsenal would you choose? 'Cause the Arsenal has several different buildings and several different configurations. So if you could give me some guidance on that, I'd appreciate it. Because what we did is we took a historical mill with a large smokestack, which is not, you know, good today, but
Right.
we showed that as part of the historical aspect to this. The Arsenal I found to be somewhat difficult. The Arsenal has cannons in front of it. Or should we put a cannon in front of it? I mean, if we're going to be literal, I'm being a little bit of a you know, asking questions here. The other part, housing. You know, it's true. You know, you have double deckers, but your double deckers also, in a lot of cases, have an attic. So it looks like 2.5 stories, not 2.
Yeah.
And so how do you portray that in a simple way? And this was our attempt at it. The library is a very distinctive building. And we saw that as a connection to a culture again, that a lot of people probably learned English and used it as a stepping stone to being, you know, a citizen of Watertown, a citizen of America. So that's the thought behind that.
Yeah, no, and I get that. I'm just thinking it's, you know, do we want the image to, you know, obviously the bridge is there, you know, which sort of,
Ben, you're going in and out again. Yeah. Is Vinny freezing up for everyone else?
The red line people with the green line people.
Oh, I
the
see
two
now.
sides of the river, the bridging. I don't know. You know, that's just, you know, can we do, I mean, not, I sort of like the style of it. Don't get me wrong. I'm just trying to figure out the connection between this. I really like the bridging cultures. And if anything, the town seal sort of reflects that, right? The two cultures, the colonist and the indigenous person, you know, meeting for the first time. I don't know. So this is just some thoughts. So I'd like to hear, see what other people think.
Steve, did you want to jump in there?
Yeah, unless there was someone else, you know, from the committee or the public wanted to jump in, I think we have enough to, you know, make some adjustments and come back to the committee with another version. I think we're close, and I appreciate the, you know, the input from the committee members, and we'll make some adjustments and bring it back.
Okay. Lisa, is your hand up for another comment or just up from last time?
Yeah. Sorry. Okay. Yeah, what I wanted to say, I'm not sure I expressed before, is that I wonder, when you're thinking about you know, maybe a mix of literal with artistic or alluding. So you have literally the bridging cultures with the water, you know, in the Perkin Tower. It's like it's a, so maybe, you know, a mix that it doesn't have to, like when you say what part of the arsenal, I'm not sure if you'd actually draw part of the arsenal building, you know, or put a cannon, just maybe that's a bad example, but sometimes a logo or images or other things evoke a feeling or evoke a way of bridging culture. So again, I also like the theme. I like the color scheme. I like that you're you know, trying to be fresh with also a nod to some history. I think the South Side, you know, in Galen Street, I might also appreciate bridging cultures. And so, anyway, I appreciate you being open to all this constructive criticism. I know it's a really hard thing. I'm really excited to see the progress, though, and the direction you're going. And so, I just want to make that point about literal and symbolic, or you know, artistic, alluding, evocative potential combo.
Okay. I think I'll just close then by noting that I would advise my fellow counselors and the consultant and the administration on the call to never, ever listen to me when it comes to anything to do with design. The fact that I'm wearing 2 colors in my sweater seems very artistic to me. So literally don't listen to any comments I have on this issue, because it's probably the last person you should ever listen to about it. So concluding with that, Steve, is there anything else before we jump into the next stuff on the list?
No, I think we have what we need. You know, I will say, I think it probably makes sense, hearing the comments, to maybe have some more generic representations. I mean, if we change the library building to the Arsenal building, and we change the, you know, the cupola to a different, you know, I think then we're going to get in a debate of, well, you know, does that really capture the Arsenal or not? And I think the idea, at least from my perspective, the idea was to capture the, you know, the feel of what Watertown is in terms of its built environment. Not necessarily, you know, we certainly use some drawings to evoke certain structures, but it was really to make more of a sense for, again, somebody who doesn't know Watertown. They're not going to know the Arsenal from the mill building, from the library, to get a sense of the built environment of Watertown. So I think, you know, it will work with Mark. We'll make some adjustments, and as I said, come back to you with another version.
Great. Mark, thank you for coming on tonight and the presentation and everything. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, and everybody have a happy holiday
Thanks. You too.
and a great new year.
Sure, and Mark, if you could just email that to Laura or something, so I'll attach it to the minutes, that would be great.
She already has a copy of it.
Okay, great, thanks.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, Laura, do you mind if, I don't know if there's going to be any update. Do you have anything on electric scooters or blue bikes? They're on the agenda, but I didn't think we had anything, but I figure I'd bring them up anyway.
Well, electric scooters, no, not really. It's in the transportation bond bill, which has not been released yet. We don't even know if it's going to be in there. The issue being the changing the regulations to conform to what scooters do these days. So I'll let you know when I, you know, through Steve, when, if anything does come out of that. So yeah, there's no change there. But I'm glad you're still interested. Blue bikes, you know, there's just some, where, if you like, you want me to go through it quickly? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's whatever you think is pertinent for as an update. I know we kind of talked about the issue like a month or two ago. So
right. So there's 4 stations that have been installed. There's 3 more coming, and we're starting to talk about expanding. There's a couple of MassDOT grant programs that we're looking at. The cost of a station is $40,000. So we are looking at a couple of grant programs that would allow us to do 2 or 3 more stations. And we're talking about where we would put them, but we have not made any decisions about that yet. I guess that's the,
Yeah, still very initial stages of that next part.
and there's
Um,
been 2,000 rides since basically August 1st.
oh wow. I guess Vinny or Lisa, do you guys have any questions on those two, on the blue bikes, electric scooters? Again, not much of an update, but they're on the agenda and they're something we're keeping in the front here. So
No, I was just, Laura said, how many rides you're saying total on blue bikes? I missed that, sorry.
1,000 rides have originated in Watertown since basically August 1st.
Originated, okay, good to know. So all the stations.
4 stations. And that the Arsenal Yard station's really only been there a short time. Oh,
Yeah.
so we moved the station from North Beacon Street to across from Town Hall. We had made a commitment to the Traffic Commission that we would not leave it up all winter because it was actually in the street. And rather than putting it in storage, we worked with Blue Bikes to find a place to move it to. So it's right across from Town Hall on the sidewalk, which is pretty wide there.
Oh, so that's just for the winter?
No, because if we'll probably get more stations. So
Oh.
I mean, we haven't made a final decision on that, but I think.
Yeah, no, I just love that, the bike lanes are great on North Beacon. It's a great location.
Oh, you'd like to see another one on North Beacon? Is that what you're asking? Why you're asking?
Well, yeah, I think people, well, you would know by the data, but I know that comments are being near the river and there's bike lanes on both sides. It's a nice street, even with the hill to ride on.
There were definitely rides coming from there. It's not, maybe we can put one of the news stations there. I thought that the location across from Town Hall was a good one because of the post office and the library and the Town Hall together and the new community path in the back. And
definitely.
so
Yeah.
I'd like to try to keep it there.
Yeah, I think it's a good spot. Great. Okay. So we'll jump right into the next issue then, which is the funding of the Pleasant Street shuttle. Steve, do you mind if I kick it over to you to kind of just give, if someone was logging in new to this issue, how we got to where we are today and why we're considering funding again?
Sure. I guess I'll go back to some of our earlier versions of in the process of reviewing development proposals and looking at the traffic impacts from those development proposals. One of the issues that came up is how can we reduce single occupant vehicle trips, particularly rush hour ones when the congestion is the heaviest. And particularly with some of our road corridors, options are limited, which led us to forming of a transportation management association, and the idea of that association being able to pull together the resources, particularly from the development proposals that occur to create a shuttle service to help provide alternatives to single occupant vehicles in some of the corridors. The TMA has been formed. It has been doing work to both encourage other forms of transportation, encourage people to find other ways to get to and from home and work, and to offset some of those impacts in the rush hours. So we have started some shuttle service in Arsenal corridor. The Pleasant Street corridor, where obviously a significant amount of development is also taking place, we hadn't been able to get that service started, partly because of the limited number of projects that had taken place already. But also, we wanted to make sure and do it in a way that would be successful. We certainly didn't want to launch a service and have it basically ride empty and fail. And we recognize that there's really, one opportunity to do this and get it right and be successful. So we've been working with a number of property owners in the corridor. We received a Department of Transportation grant to provide seed money. Between that, some town funding and the funding from projects within the corridor, we were able to, put together a shuttle service for this corridor. We went out to bid to look at consultants or providers to provide the service. And, the pandemic hit, and, that's really put everything in a whole new light. I think has raised lots of questions about, how a successful shuttle will run or should run or maybe shouldn't run. Lots of questions there. But, with the vaccine being distributed, I think in the next 6 months or so, we should be coming out of the pandemic. And I think there's still lots of questions about what will happen, but I think what I'd like to do at this point is turn it over to Laura to talk about that selection process, who we've selected and what we anticipate doing going forward. And I'll certainly be happy to chime in with any additional comments when she's done.
So we got 6 proposals submitted in response to the RFP, and we interviewed 3 and came up with, we chose We Drive You in the end. They had a really strong proposal, a strong interview, and unbelievably strong references.
Wait, who is that again, Laura?
Drive You, which is the group that runs the shuttle for Athena, for Arsenal on the Charles, and is also running the Watertown connector on Arsenal Street, which started in around, I think, September 1st it started, but the ridership has been really minimal. We're going to meet with them within the next few weeks to sort of lay out a decision-making process about when is the right time to start. And there's many other issues, such as how to incorporate residents. In addition to the partners that we have who will be paying for the shuttle, we also want to include residents, and we have to figure out how they should pay and how much they should pay, and many questions like that. We haven't determined where the stops are going to be. I mean, there's some things that we could work on. The big question being, when is the right time to start? We are probably going to lose most of the grant because we have to use that money by June 30th. So there's another grant program we're going to apply for. That money becomes available in October. But if we wanted to start in July, we definitely are going to need additional funds. If we get the grant and we can wait till October, then we may be able to do it without additional funds, at least for the first year. There's so many moving pieces. Are there ways we can minimize it? Can we have one van, it's one route instead of 2 routes? There's just a lot of moving pieces, honestly. But we are just to say, we are really grappling with them all right now.
If I could just add a couple more things, Mr. Chairman. One thing that I think is significant, and one thing that the council's been very interested in, is the Pleasant Street service will be available to the public, and that does generate some questions as well for how we move forward. But I think that's also part of the reason that we ultimately chose We Drive You. Both or multiple vendors who applied, I think could do a fantastic job, and some of the other vendors that applied, I think, were very strong as well. But I think the one thing that stood out to me, and one of the reasons that I supported going with We Drive You, is I think what's the most critical thing going forward is generating the ridership and getting people to actually use the shuttle and making sure that we're getting people taking it. Because, as we struggled for so long to start this, that's been the key issue. We don't want to, provide a shuttle that rides empty. That adds to the problem, not helps it. So I think that's really the key issue. So 2 things going forward that are so important is, one, providing those mechanisms to encourage the ridership and get people to use it and to adjust their patterns, particularly coming out of a pandemic. That's going to be key. And I think WeDriveU is going to be an excellent consultant to help us do that, to create that that connection with the riders, that ridership experience, and to help us get people in seats on the buses. The other thing I wanted to say real quickly is, as Laura said, there are a lot of moving pieces. There's still lots of unknowns, and I'm sure that we'll be back for additional conversations about some of those pieces. One of the things I did want to, sort of give a preliminary to is that I think it's likely that we will need some additional town funding, consistent with the budget policy guidelines that the council has put forward. So, that likely will be a portion of my budget proposal coming up for the coming fiscal year.
I have a couple quick questions. Do you, as one of those moving parts that you're considering, is how much of a reduction the MBTA might put into place into lines that affect Watertown? And then if that's going to increase or motivate residents to go find an alternative, which this could presumably be?
I think that would likely be more of a factor probably in the Arsenal corridor service that we're providing, the Watertown connector, because the Pleasant Street corridor, for all intents and purposes, is not served by the MBTA at all. I'm not sure it'll have much of an impact there. We're really creating a service that will hopefully provide service to people in that corridor that doesn't currently exist.
Okay. And then do you think, let's say that most of that grant money doesn't get spent and we lose it on June 30 and we don't get an additional grant. Do you have a rough dollar figure on what do you think it would cost to get the pilot shuttle going?
So there's a couple things there. One would be looking at how much shuttle service do we want to provide? And the real obvious question is one bus or two buses. The numbers, obviously go up the more buses we have. I think the other thing that's an important part of that conversation is, and Laura did send me a spreadsheet that I can't find at the moment, with numbers in it. So if you'll bear with me for just a second.
No problem. Yeah, I'm not going to hold you to it because like you said, there's a million things that could change. I was just curious about like the range. Like, I mean,
So yeah, I think the other question would be whether we start in July or we wait until January. That obviously that would make a difference too. And then of course, whether we get grants or not. The worst case scenario, if we were going to do an entire year and we had no grant money available, we would probably take the town contribution of roughly 100,000, and that would go up to probably 300,000. So we'd probably need an additional 200,000. That's a worst case. I think probably a better scenario would be launching in July as opposed to waiting to January. Being able to utilize some of the grant funds that we do have available, using the TNC funds that we currently have available. As you recall, some of those were unallocated. Then we're probably talking about something closer to a $50,000 gap.
okay, great. I'll open it up to the committee now. Felicia or Vinny, have any initial questions?
Yeah, if I just do, so Steve, that 300,000, that's a 1 year operating cost, 12 months? Is that with one or two buses?
That was two buses.
Okay. How much of that, so we're not, and then that is any of that money based on operation based on like residents buying tickets to ride it or no?
Yeah, that didn't assume any revenue from that, but you're right. That would be, I'm assuming that there would be a purchase, so that would generate some revenue. Obviously we want to keep that pretty nominal in order, again, encourage ridership. But I think also that's an important distinction, because if I'm a developer and I'm paying, 25,000 a year for my residents to ride, the perception, if the general public gets to ride it for free, then, why am I paying for a portion of it? If they're paying for a portion of it and the public's paying for a portion of it, I think it makes it more equitable, makes it more reasonable. So I think it's important that we have some fee for the general public ridership. Again, hopefully nominal. But yes, those numbers didn't include any revenue from that.
So I'm just thinking out loud here that, certainly if the town was paying nothing for the operation, the developers were paying it all, I think that argument would be a good argument that, they're paying something, why should residents ride it for free? But if we're going to use actual public dollars to help fund this, which we are, I guess thinking out loud, would it make more sense in the pilot phase to actually have it be free to residents, just so we can get people, more likely to use it as a pilot? I mean, the revenue we're going to get is going to be minimal compared to what, if it's going to cost $300,000, we're not going to get $100,000 of revenue. I mean, we're not going to get $50,000 of revenue. We're not, if we charge everybody $1 to ride it, it's probably going to be, not even 5 figures. So, so I guess, and again, since you are considering, using a little bit more of public money to make the pilot work, I'm just throwing it out there. Does it make sense to just sort of roll it out for the first year where residents can ride it for free? And maybe we would actually get a lot more people out of their cars. And then after the first year, we could decide, what to do. Do we need to charge a nominal fee, or do we want to, are we happy with what we're doing and we want to continue doing it? So I would just throw that out there, that to challenge the team to sort of think about the bigger picture.
Yeah,
my thoughts.
appreciate that.
Councilor Faulkner?
Thanks. I think I'm not muted. I was trying to remember. I don't think it you can't transport bikes on the shuttles, right? We're not looking at that because the shuttle is just like the last
I think you can
quarter mile.
on a shuttle.
Yep.
Oh, you could? Okay, I was just curious.
Those front racks.
Nice. So we'll open it up. If anyone in the public or any other counselors or anyone has a question or comment or anything, just use the raise hand feature. And okay. I don't see anyone right now. Give it another 5 seconds for any questions, comments, concerns, queries. Okay.
I do see Sophia's here from the TMA, so I don't know if she wanted to add anything, or is she happy with what Steve and Laura did?
No, I don't have anything to add. I'm in support of, Steve and Laura, and I will fully support, the rollout of this. And
Nice.
Great, thank you, Sophia.
Sophia has also been very helpful. She's really written a grant proposal, so that's been huge.
Nice. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Everything you're saying is exactly, I think on point. We're in a fast-moving, very strange transportation time. So, and we'll see what happens when everything kicks back into high gear in whatever 6 to 9 months.
All right.
Okay. So I think if there's nothing else, then we'll move on to the last issue we had tonight, and that is updating or amending the comprehensive plan with suggested strategies and how to fulfill them. Don't exactly know what that means, so I think I'll just turn it over to Steve for your best interpretation of that, and how we move forward with that from here.
Yeah, I guess I would offer a few thoughts and certainly happy to address any questions that the council may have. Back in February of 2019, we did a memo that sort of summarized all the implementation strategies of the comprehensive plan and sort of where we thought we were. At that point, we were at about implementation in some form or fashion of about 75% of the implementation strategies, obviously not 100%. And since then, some additional things have been implemented. We've had some additional, things done. So we could certainly go through an effort of updating that. I thought in the context of this conversation, though, it probably would make more sense to discuss, and happy to do that if the council would like us to, but I thought it might make more sense to talk about the process for updating the plan and do we think we're there? I'm going to speculate that there's some desire and interest to pursue an update, and I would agree with that. I think it makes sense. I think 5 years into a plan is about time to start revisiting some of those policy recommendations. I think it is a short enough period of time. If it were 10 years, I'd probably say, let's look at a more major rewrite. But I think at a 5-year interval, it makes sense to really take stock of where we are, what things have changed, what we've implemented and what we haven't implemented, and reevaluate those things from the perspective of the majority of the plan or a lot of the plan remaining unchanged. So I guess what I would suggest, if it made sense to the council, would be to again, put some dollars in the budget for this fiscal year to bring on a consultant to help us with that. I think we have some incredibly skilled staff planners who could probably do a great job of it all on their own, but unfortunately we got an awful lot on our plates these days. So I think it will require some consultant assistance. So I guess I would suggest at this point, putting that again in my budget for the fiscal year. And, obviously we'll go through that process and see what comes out the other end, but hopefully get some funding to make that a reality.
Great. What I'll do then is I'll open it up to the committee with any questions, comments on that strategy. Councilor Feltner.
Yeah, well, I guess, do you have a recommendation? I mean, you said you'll come forward with a request, or you prefer the committee to endorse a recommendation that funds be allocated, and do you have a general sense of what it would be? Or?
Yeah, I didn't prepare anything specific. I would think off the top of my head, and probably I should be a little more thoughtful about it before I ask you for endorsing something specific, but I would say somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000 would be what I'm looking for, somewhere in that range. And again, if it makes sense to the council, I could put together something more formal if you'd like, that you could endorse as part of my budget submission. I'm not sure you need to do that, but certainly happy to if you'd like to.
Yeah,
and I was wondering too, ideally, if you had a sense of the time frame once the consultant came on board that you think might give adequate time to discern.
I think the two things that make that process long, there's clearly the research and the crafting language and that sort of thing. Usually that's not the part that takes the biggest part of time. It's usually that public conversation, both with the general public and then with either the planning board or the council, in terms of going through the specifics of that and hammering out language. Hopefully by the time we're getting into this, we're outside of the pandemic, so we can have normal community involvement again, which I think would be important. There's some things that lend themselves to be able to function fine in this format we're on tonight. But I really think if you really want to have, community engagement, it's really difficult to do in this format. So I'd be hopeful that we could do a much better, much more involved series of public involvement. And so those take time. So, typically 6 months to a year is not unreasonable. Again, I think that kind of depends on the scope of what we ask somebody to do and what that public participation process would be. But I can certainly make that part of a more formal submission to you guys to consider and recommend.
I'll say it's probably the advantageous part of this would be to recommend this. Will this committee make some sort of recommendation that the administration fund give the proper funding to reevaluate the comprehensive plan? Because then that way, let's say state aid drops 30% next year and Steve's not getting any of this money in his budget. We have a recommendation from the committee that presumably, hopefully the full council endorses. That way we could include it in budget priority guidelines for next year. So it probably makes sense to have something come out of the committee just as a backup in case the something happens. At least we have, we were following the procedure so we can get it in the budget priority guidelines. That way, if there's, plus this is good, this is one-time money as opposed to something that's recurring. So, if there's extra money at the end of the year and it's a budget priority guideline, it would fit really well. Just my thought. I'm sorry, Vinny.
Sure, that was actually what I was thinking. It probably would make the most sense for this committee to recommend agreeing with the plan to hire a consultant to review and update the comprehensive plan. Do we want to bound that by saying estimated to be cost between 50 to 100,000 and take 6 to 12 months, or do we want to just leave it? Recommend it, agree with the recommendation, and then at some point later, Steve would put together an actual proposal about what he thinks it would cost and what the time frame would be. I don't want to put something in a motion that then it turns out to be slightly different.
Agreed.
So I would just think if we ask the full council to agree that we should hire a consultant to review and update the comprehensive plan, I would be happy with just doing that.
Yeah. Okay. Let's do this then. If you're okay, Vinny, will you make that motion? We'll see if we get a second, and then we can open it up for discussion on the motion, and we can go to other counselors, members of the public for input.
Okay, so the motion would be that we would recommend the full-time council to agree with the Department of Community Development and Planning's recommendation to hire a consultant to review and update the comprehensive plan.
Is there a second?
Second.
Great. Okay, so open up for discussion. Does anyone not in the committee, but any other counselors or members of the public have a question or comment or anything on this? Caroline, yes.
I was just going to say it totally makes sense to me, and I think that's the right way to go. I was actually thinking that myself when I was listening.
Anyone else have any questions, comments? Councilor Feltner?
Yeah, I was just wondering do we say anything about anticipating, within the process starting within a fiscal year or not, to just kind of indicate that it's not 2-3 years from now, ideally, but this next cycle. That's the only thing I thought. I totally agree, with that Steve would come back and have a proposal, but that we'll hopefully take action on it. It's not just a nice idea.
Yeah, absolutely. Vinny, what do you think? Do you think we should have like a preferred timeline indicated in the motion, or do you think it's okay without it?
Add in fiscal year 22.
Yeah.
Which would give us a expectation that it would happen,
Yeah. I guess I could.
sometime between July of 21 and June of 22. So do you want to just add fiscal year 22 to the end of that?
That's fine with me. Do you want to amend your motion? And Lisa, you okay with your second to the amendment?
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's our expectation, that it wouldn't happen like 5 years from now. It would actually happen next year.
Yeah. Okay. Are there any other counselors or members of the public that have any questions or anything on this? Give it a couple seconds. Okay. I don't see any. So we have a motion and a second. Sorry, Councilor Feltner.
To the transportation point, I think this is I don't know if you want to just reiterate the letter of endorsement. I know, as Ken, you were pointing out, there's concern with the MBTA cuts that Laura, that you did sign on. I didn't know if you publicly, on the camera, that a letter did go to the MBTA control board, and that.
Yes, it did. That we participated in. I worked with a small group of people on that letter. We didn't do our own letter, but that was a very strong letter, because the director there is, he really combed through the budget, and I thought that he did a better job than I could have probably done. Just in terms of like really understanding the budget better than I did. He formerly worked at the MBTA as well.
So we'll take a vote on the motion. Councilor Picciarelli,
Yes.
Councilor Feltner,
Yes.
and myself.
Berlin.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So those were the issues that we had this evening. I guess if there's nothing else, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second? Okay. Councilor Picciarelli,
Yes.
Councilor Feltner,
Yes.
and myself, yes.
Okay.
Great.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, take care. Bye.
Bye.
Good night.